There is a quiet habit that almost all of us share, yet very few of us truly see. It happens in silence. No one announces it. No one warns us when it begins. And yet, it shapes how we feel about ourselves more than almost anything else in modern life. You pick up your phone, just for a moment. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you are bored. Maybe you just want to relax after a long day. Your finger scrolls almost automatically. One image, then another, then a video, then a story. And before you even realize it, something inside you has shifted. At first, it feels harmless. You see someone traveling to a beautiful place. Another person celebrating a success. Someone else smiling, glowing, seemingly living a perfect life. And consciously, you might even feel happy for them. You might even tell yourself, "That's nice. Good for them." But underneath that surface reaction, something much more subtle is happening. A comparison has already begun. Without words, without permission, the mind starts measuring their life and my life, their success and my progress, their happiness and my reality. And in that silent measurement, a quiet discomfort begins to grow. Not always dramatic, not always overwhelming. Sometimes it is just a faint sense of something is missing. Sometimes it is a small tightening in the chest. Sometimes it is a thought so subtle you barely notice it. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm not enough. This is the invisible suffering of our time. It does not shout. It whispers. And because it whispers, we rarely question it. We assume it is normal. But let us look more closely. What you see on social media is not life as it is. It is life as it is presented. Carefully selected. Filtered. Edited. Refined. Moments of joy are highlighted, while moments of confusion, loneliness, and struggle are quietly hidden away. And yet, the mind does something very strange. It takes these fragments and treats them as the whole. It compares your full, unedited life, your doubts, your fears, your unfinished journey, with someone else's highlight reel. And of course, in that comparison, you will always lose. Not because you are lacking, but because the comparison itself is fundamentally distorted. Still, the mind continues. Why? Because this tendency did not begin with social media. Long before screens, long before technology, the human mind already had certain deep patterns. In the language of the Dhamma, these patterns are known as craving, aversion, and delusion. Craving, the endless movement toward what we think will complete us. Aversion, the subtle resistance toward what we don't want to feel. Delusion, the inability to see things clearly as they are. Social media did not create these forces. It amplified them. Craving becomes stronger when we constantly see what others have. Aversion arises when we feel left behind or inferior. Delusion deepens when we mistake appearances for reality. And so, every scroll is not just an action, it is a conditioning. The mind learns again and again. Look at them. Compare. Judge. Desire. Doubt yourself. And after enough repetition, this becomes automatic. You no longer choose to compare. Comparison happens to you. This is why even when people are aware of the problem, they still feel trapped. They might say, "I know social media is not real," and yet they still feel inadequate. They might say, "I shouldn't compare," and yet the comparison continues. Because the issue is not intellectual. It is experiential. It is not about what you know. It is about how the mind has been trained to react. And this is a crucial point to understand. The problem is not social media itself. Social media is just a tool, a mirror, a stream of images and information. The real issue lies in the untrained mind that encounters it. Two people can scroll through the same content and have completely different experiences. One feels inspired, open, joyful. The other feels anxious, inadequate, restless. Same images. Different minds. So the question is no longer, how do I change the world outside? The question becomes much deeper. How do I transform the way my mind relates to what it sees? Because as long as the mind is caught in comparison, no amount of external change will bring peace. Even if you achieve what others have, the mind will simply find someone else to compare with. Even if you gain success, beauty, recognition, the game does not end. It only shifts. There will always be someone richer, someone more successful, someone more admired. And the mind, if left untrained, will continue chasing endlessly. This is why comparison is so exhausting. Because it has no natural endpoint. It is a race without a finish line. And yet, most people do not realize they are running. They think they are simply keeping up. They think they are staying informed. They think they are just relaxing. But inside, something else is happening. The heart is slowly tightening. The sense of self becomes more fragile. The joy of simply being alive, just as you are, in this moment, begins to fade. So what is the way out? Should we reject technology? Delete everything? Escape from the world? Perhaps that might bring temporary relief. But it does not address the root. Because even without social media, the mind can still compare. It can compare with neighbors, with friends, with memories, with imagined futures. The external trigger may change, but the internal pattern remains. And this is where a profound shift becomes possible. Instead of trying to control every image, every platform, every external condition, what if we learn to transform the mind itself? What if, rather than reacting with comparison, the mind could respond with something entirely different? Something stable. Something wise. Something deeply human. Because the truth is this. The mind does not have to compare. It has simply learned to. And what is learned can be unlearned. What is conditioned can be reconditioned. And this is where an ancient teaching becomes unexpectedly relevant to the modern world. A teaching that does not ask you to withdraw from life, but to transform your experience of it. A teaching that does not fight comparison directly, but dissolves the very conditions that give rise to it. This teaching is known as the Brahma-viharas, the four qualities of the awakened heart. They are not beliefs. They are not philosophies. They are ways of being, ways of seeing, ways of relating to yourself and to others. And when they are cultivated deeply, something remarkable begins to happen. The same world remains. The same images appear. The same people succeed, struggle, smile, and share. But your mind no longer suffers in the same way. Comparison loosens its grip. Envy begins to fade. And in its place, something unexpected arises. A quiet sense of ease. A genuine goodwill toward others. A stability that does not depend on how you measure up. But before we explore these qualities, we must first understand them. Not as abstract ideas, but as living, trainable states of mind. Because only then can we begin to see how they offer not just relief, but a complete transformation of how we experience the modern world. If the suffering of comparison is subtle, quiet, and deeply conditioned, then the way out cannot be superficial. It cannot be another technique to feel better quickly. It cannot be another strategy to win the comparison game. Because as long as the game continues, suffering continues. What is needed is not a new way to compete. What is needed is a completely different way of relating. And this is where the ancient teaching of the Brahma-viharas enters, not as philosophy, but as a direct transformation of the heart. The word itself may sound distant, almost mystical, Brahma-viharas. But its meaning is surprisingly simple. Brahma refers to something noble, elevated, divine, not in the sense of a god above, but in the sense of the highest potential within the human mind. Vihara means a dwelling, a place where one lives, abides, rests. So when we speak of the Brahma-viharas, we are not speaking about something you visit occasionally. We are speaking about where your mind chooses to live. Think about that for a moment. Right now, where does your mind live? Does it live in comparison? In restlessness? In constant measuring, judging, evaluating? Or can it learn to live somewhere else, somewhere freer? The Brahma-viharas are called the four divine abodes, because they represent four ways of dwelling in the world, four qualities that, when cultivated, transform not only how you feel, but how you perceive reality itself. They are not imposed from outside. They are uncovered, strengthened, trained from within. The first is Metta, loving kindness. Not love as attachment. Not love as possession. But a simple, radical intention, the wish for well-being. May I be well. May you be well. May all beings be well. It sounds almost too simple, almost naive. But look closely at the mind during comparison. Is there goodwill toward oneself? Or is there subtle hostility? A quiet voice that says, "You should be better, you should be more, you are not enough." Metta begins to undo this pattern. It introduces a new possibility, that you can relate to yourself, not as a project to fix, but as a being worthy of kindness. Exactly as you are in this moment. And from that foundation, something begins to shift. Because when you are no longer at war with yourself, you are no longer threatened by others. The second is Karuna, compassion. If loving kindness is the wish for well-being, compassion is the response to suffering. But not in a distant, abstract way. Karuna is the ability to feel the pain of life, your own and others, without turning away. Now consider what happens on social media. You see images of success, beauty, happiness, and the mind assumes, they are fine. They are better. They have no problems like mine. This is delusion. Because every human life contains struggle. Behind every smile, there are unseen fears. Behind every achievement, there are sacrifices, doubts, moments of loneliness that are never posted. Compassion allows you to see this. Not as a cynical rejection of others' happiness, but as a deeper understanding of their humanity. And when you truly see that others also struggle, envy begins to soften. The distance between me and them begins to dissolve. The third quality is perhaps the most radical of all, Mudita, often translated as sympathetic joy. This is the ability to feel joy for the happiness of others. Not tolerate it. Not pretend to celebrate it. But genuinely rejoice in it. Now pause for a moment and reflect honestly. How often does this arise naturally? When someone succeeds where you have struggled. When someone receives recognition you have longed for. When someone seems to be living the life you wish you had. What is the immediate reaction of the untrained mind? Comparison. Tightness. A subtle resistance. Mudita goes directly against this habit. It says, their happiness does not diminish yours. Their success does not take anything away from you. In fact, joy is not a limited resource. It can expand. It can be shared. But to experience this requires a profound shift, from seeing life as a competition, to seeing it as a field of interconnected experiences. Mudita is rare in the modern world, because modern culture thrives on comparison. But precisely because it is rare, it is powerful. It liberates the heart in a way that nothing else can. And finally, there is Upekkha, equanimity. If the first three qualities open the heart, equanimity stabilizes it. It is the ability to remain balanced, steady, and clear in the midst of all conditions. Pleasure and pain, praise and blame, gain and loss. In the world of social media, this is perhaps the most necessary quality. Because what is social media if not a constant fluctuation of these conditions? A post gets many likes, you feel uplifted. Another is ignored, you feel deflated. Someone praises you, you feel validated. Someone criticizes, you feel shaken. The mind moves up and down, endlessly. Upekkha does not suppress emotion. It understands it. It sees that all these experiences arise due to causes and conditions, and they pass. They are not stable. They are not a reliable foundation for identity. And so, instead of clinging or resisting, the mind learns to observe, to remain grounded, to not be pulled into every wave. When equanimity is present, something remarkable happens. You can engage with the world without being overwhelmed by it. You can participate without losing yourself. Now, when we look at these four qualities together, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, we begin to see something deeper. They are not separate practices. They are a complete system, a re-education of the heart. Where comparison once lived, something else can grow. Where there was insecurity, there can be kindness. Where there was envy, there can be joy. Where there was instability, there can be balance. And this is why the Brahma-viharas are not just moral ideals. They are practical tools. They directly counter the very forces that drive comparison. Craving is softened by loving kindness. Aversion is dissolved by compassion. Jealousy is transformed by sympathetic joy. Restlessness is calmed by equanimity. So instead of trying to stop comparison at the surface, we begin to remove the roots that sustain it. And when the roots are gone, the pattern no longer has anything to feed on. The same images may appear. The same world continues. But your experience of it is no longer defined by lack, by competition, by silent judgment. Instead, something much more spacious begins to emerge. A mind that can appreciate without grasping. A heart that can bear. A presence that is no longer trapped in the endless question, how do I measure up? But rests quietly in a different understanding. There is nothing to measure. There is only then how you choose to meet it. And the Brahma-viharas are that choice. If we look deeply, beneath all comparison, beneath the endless measuring, scrolling, evaluating, there is a single wound that quietly drives it all. A feeling that is rarely spoken out loud, but constantly felt. I am not enough. Not successful enough. Not attractive enough. Not accomplished enough. Not living fully enough. And what makes this wound so powerful is not just that it appears, but that we believe it. We treat it as truth. So every time we scroll, we are not just looking at others. We are unconsciously asking a question. Where do I stand compared to them? And when the answer feels lacking, the wound deepens. But here is something we must see clearly. This wound is not created by social media. It is revealed by it. It has been there for a long time, quietly shaped by past experiences, by conditioning, by the way we have learned to relate to ourselves. Social media simply shines a light on it, again and again, until it becomes impossible to ignore. So if we truly want to be free from comparison, we cannot just change what we see. We must change how we relate to this inner voice that says, I am not enough. And this is where the first two Brahma-viharas become not just helpful, but essential. Metta and Karuna are not abstract virtues. They are medicine. Medicine for the deepest layer of suffering within the human mind. Let us begin with Metta, loving kindness. At first, it may sound gentle, even simple. But do not underestimate it. Because Metta goes directly against one of the strongest habits we have, self-judgment. What happens in the mind when you feel inferior? There is a tightening, a contraction, and then a voice arises. You should be better. You are falling behind. Why can't you be like them? This voice may sound motivating on the surface, but in truth it is harsh. It is unforgiving. It is never satisfied. And the more you listen to it, the more the wound of not enough grows. Metta introduces a completely. It does not argue with the voice. It does not try to prove it wrong. It simply offers something the mind is not used to receiving. Kindness. A quiet, steady intention. May I be well. May I be at ease. Be enough, just as I am in this moment. At first, this may feel unnatural, even uncomfortable, because the mind has been trained to believe that worth must That kindness must be deserved. That you can only accept yourself after you improve, achieve, become something more. But Metta gently challenges this belief. It says, what if well-being is not a reward? What if you do not need to fix yourself before you can be kind to yourself? And when this intention is repeated, not just once, but consistently, something begins to soften. The inner environment changes. The harsh voice loses its dominance. And in its place, a new relationship begins to form. You are no longer treating yourself as an object to improve. You are relating to yourself as a being, worthy of care. Now, something subtle but profound happens here. Because when you are no longer attacking yourself, you are no longer as threatened by others. Think about it. Why does someone else's success trigger discomfort? Because it seems to confirm your own inadequacy. But if the foundation of self-rejection begins to dissolve, that trigger weakens. The comparison may still arise, but it no longer cuts as deeply. Because there is something within you that says, I am already okay. Not perfect. Not complete. But okay. And from that place, the heart begins to open, not just toward yourself, but toward others. This is where Karuna, compassion, naturally follows. If Metta is the wish for well-being, Karuna is the response when we encounter suffering. But here is the important shift. Before compassion can truly extend outward, it must include yourself. Because if you are blind to your own suffering, you will misinterpret the suffering of others. Now return to the experience of social media. You see someone smiling, achieving, celebrating. And the mind says, they are happy. They have it all together. But this is a surface perception. It sees deeper. It understands that every human life, no matter how polished it appears, contains struggle. The anxiety before success. The pressure to maintain an image. The loneliness that is never posted. The quiet moments of doubt that no one shares. When Karuna is present, you begin to sense this. Not as a story you tell yourself, but as a felt understanding. You recognize that the person you are comparing yourself to is not a perfect image. They are a human being, just like you. Subject to the same uncertainties, the same impermanence. And in that recognition, something shifts. The distance between me and them begins to collapse. The comparison loses its sharp edge. Because you are no longer relating to an image. You are relating to a life. And compassion does something very powerful here. It replaces judgment with understanding. It replaces envy with connection. Instead of asking, have what I don't, the heart begins to respond differently. May they be free from suffering. May they find peace in their own way. This does not mean you deny your own desires. It does not mean you suppress ambition or growth. It simply means that your relationship to others is no longer based on competition. It is based on shared humanity. And when both Metta and Karuna are cultivated together, they begin to heal the root of comparison. Because comparison feeds on separation. On the illusion that I am here, and they are there, and I must measure the distance. But loving kindness and compassion dissolve that illusion. They remind you that beneath all roles, all appearances, all achievements, there is a common ground, a shared condition of being human. And in that shared space, the question is no longer, how do I compare? But something much more meaningful. How can I relate, with kindness, with understanding, with wisdom? And when this question becomes the foundation of your experience, the wound of not enough begins to lose its power. Not because you have proven it wrong, but because you are no longer feeding it. You are no longer building your identity on comparison. You are building it on something far more stable. A heart that knows how to care. A mind that knows how to understand. And from this foundation, something new becomes possible. Because even when comparison fades, there is still one subtle habit left. A habit so ingrained, so normalized, that we rarely question it. the inability to truly rejoice in the happiness of others. And until that is transformed, freedom is not yet complete. So now we move deeper into one of the most transformative and most overlooked qualities of the awakened heart. Even after we begin to soften the inner wound of not enough, even after we learn to treat ourselves with kindness and to see others with compassion, there is still something very subtle that remains. It does not shout like self-judgment. It does not ache like insecurity. It hides quietly in the background, and that is envy. Not always obvious, not always conscious. Sometimes it appears as a small hesitation when someone shares good news. A slight tightness when another person succeeds in the very area you've been struggling with. A thought that passes quickly, almost unnoticed. Why them, and not me? This is one of the most deeply conditioned patterns of the human mind. Because from a very early age, we are taught, directly or indirectly, that life is a competition. Grades are compared. Achievements are ranked. Success is measured. And over time, this conditioning becomes internalized. We no longer need others to compare us. We compare ourselves. Constantly. So when we encounter someone else's happiness, especially in a world where that happiness is displayed so frequently and so vividly, it does not always feel like something we can celebrate. It feels like something we must measure ourselves against. And this is where the third Brahma-vihara enters, quietly, but powerfully. Mudita, sympathetic joy. The ability to feel genuine happiness for the happiness of others. Now, it may sound like a beautiful idea. But when you look closely, it is revolutionary. Because mudita does something that almost nothing else does. It completely dismantles the logic. Think about it. Comparison depends on a certain assumption. That happiness is limited. That success is scarce. That if someone else has more, you must have less, is rarely questioned. It operates silently, shaping how we feel, how we react, how we relate. But mudita challenges it at the root. It invites a different perception. That another person's joy does not diminish your own. That life is not a zero-sum game. That happiness can be shared, expanded, multiplied. But this is not something the mind immediately accepts. Because the habit of comparison is strong. So when you first begin to practice mudita, it may feel artificial. You may say the words, "I'm happy for them," but inside, resistance remains. And this is important to understand. Mudita is not about pretending. It is not about forcing yourself to feel something you don't. It is about gently retraining the mind. Each time envy arises, you do not suppress it. You acknowledge it. You see it clearly. This is envy. This is the old pattern. And then, slowly, patiently, you introduce a new intention. May their happiness continue. May their success bring them peace. May their joy grow. At first, it may feel small. But over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind starts to loosen its grip on comparison. Because instead of tightening when others succeed, it begins to open. Instead of contracting, it expands. And in that expansion, there is a sense of freedom that is very difficult to describe, but unmistakable when it is felt. You are no longer threatened by the happiness of others. You are nourished by it. Imagine what that means in a world like ours. A world where, every day, you are exposed to the lives of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Without mudita, this becomes overwhelming. Every success you see becomes another point of comparison. Another subtle wound. But with mudita, the same experience transforms. Every moment of joy you encounter becomes an opportunity to feel joy. Not borrowed joy. Not dependent joy. But a joy that arises from within your own heart. This is why mudita is not just an antidote to envy. It is a source of happiness. A happiness that is not limited by your personal circumstances. A happiness that grows as the world around you flourishes. And yet, even this is not complete. because there is another challenge that remains. Even if you learn to rejoice in others' happiness, what happens when your own experience fluctuates? What happens when you are praised one moment and ignored the next? When you feel confident one day and uncertain the next? To rise and fall based on how others respond to you? This is the second layer of suffering in the modern world. Not just comparison with others, but instability within oneself. And this is where the fourth Brahma-vihara becomes essential. Upekkha. Equanimity. If Mudita opens the heart outward, Upekkha stabilizes it from within. Because the truth is this: life is not stable. Conditions are constantly changing. On social media, this is magnified. One post receives attention, you feel seen. Another is overlooked, you feel invisible. Up. Another brings you down. The mind moves, up and down, again and again. And without equanimity, you are at the mercy of these movements. Your sense of self becomes tied to external feedback. Your emotional state becomes dependent on conditions you cannot control. Upekkha changes this relationship. It does not remove the highs and lows. It changes how you meet them. With equanimity, you begin to see clearly. This praise is just a condition. This criticism is just a condition. This success, this failure, this attention, this neglect. All of it arises and passes. None of it is stable enough to define who you are. And when this understanding deepens, not just intellectually, but experientially, the mind begins to settle. It no longer chases every high. It no longer resists every low. It becomes steady, balanced, free. This does not mean you become indifferent. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you care without clinging. You engage without losing yourself. And this is a profound shift. Because now, when you encounter the world, whether online or offline, you are no longer constantly reacting. You are observing. You are grounded. You are not pulled into every comparison, every emotional fluctuation, every passing judgment. You begin to experience something rare in the modern world: inner stability. And when Mudita and Upekkha are cultivated together, something extraordinary happens. You are free from envy and free from instability. You can celebrate others without losing yourself. You can move through changing conditions without being shaken. You are no longer trapped in the endless cycle of, I am better, I am worse, I am ahead, I am behind. Because that entire framework begins to dissolve. And in its place, there is a different way of being. A quiet confidence, a steady presence, a heart that is open, and a mind that is balanced. And from this place, something becomes clear. The problem was never the world. It was never the success of others. It was never the images, the posts, the endless stream of information. The problem was how the mind related to all of it. And now, that relationship is changing. Not through force, not through avoidance, but through understanding and cultivation. And as this transformation deepens, one final question naturally arises: how do we live this? Not in theory, not in isolation, but in the middle of our daily lives. In the very world that once triggered so much comparison? This is where the real, where insight must become practice, where the path moves from understanding into living. At this point, something important must be understood. It is easy to reflect, to feel inspired for a moment. It is easy to recognize the patterns of comparison, to see the suffering clearly, to even understand deeply that there is another way to live. But it is not transformation, because the habits we are speaking about are not intellectual. They are lived. They are repeated, again and again, in the smallest moments of daily life. So if the Brahma-viharas are to become real, if they are to truly free the mind from comparison, then they cannot remain as ideas. They must become a way of living. And this is where the teaching becomes both simple and demanding. Because the world does not need to change for you to practice. In fact, the world as it is the practice. The next time you pick up your phone, that is the practice. The next time you scroll, that is the practice. The next time you feel that subtle tightening in your chest, that is the practice. We often imagine that transformation requires a special environment, a quiet place, a retreat, a life removed from distraction. But the truth is far more direct. Every moment of contact is an opportunity, not to escape, but to respond differently. So let us bring this down from the level of concept into the level of experience. Imagine this. You are about to open social media. Before your finger touches the screen, pause. Just for a moment. And gently set an intention. May I meet whatever I see, with a kind and steady mind. This is where Metta begins. Not after you are triggered, but before. It is like preparing the ground, before planting seeds. And then you begin to scroll. An image appears, someone smiling, celebrating, sharing a moment of happiness. Immediately, the old pattern may try to arise. Comparison. Measurement. But now, something new is possible. Instead of following that pattern, you pause again. And you bring in Mudita. May their happiness continue. At first, it may feel small, even mechanical. But do not underestimate this moment. Because in that instant, you are doing something radical. You are interrupting a lifelong habit. You are choosing expansion instead of contraction. And then you continue. Another post appears. This time, someone shares something difficult, loss, struggle, pain. And instead of scrolling past, or reacting with indifference, you allow Karuna to arise. May they be free from suffering. And suddenly, the experience of scrolling changes. It is no longer consumption. It becomes connection. Not superficial connection, but a quiet, internal resonance with the lives of others. And then, perhaps, something happens within you. A feeling arises. Maybe discomfort. Maybe insecurity. Maybe that familiar sense of, not enough. And here, this is where Upekkha becomes essential. Instead of reacting, instead of immediately trying to fix or escape the feeling, you pause. You observe. You recognize feeling. It has arisen. It will pass. You do not push it away. You do not cling to it. You simply allow it to be known. And in that space, something shifts. Controlled by the experience. You are relating to it with awareness. Now, if you continue this practice, not perfectly, not constantly, but sincerely, change over time. The same world is still there. The same images. The same people. The same endless stream of content. But your relationship to it is no longer the same. There was once tension, there is now space. Where there was once comparison, there is now understanding. Where there was once restlessness, there is now a quiet stability. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, the need to compare begins to fade. Not because you forced it to stop, but because the conditions that sustained it are no longer being fed. And this is the key to the entire teaching. We do not fight comparison directly. We transform the mind that compares. We replace the conditions of envy, insecurity, and instability with qualities that cannot coexist with them. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. And as these qualities deepen, something very surprising happens. You begin to experience the world, not as a place where you must prove yourself, but as a field of relationships, a field of shared humanity, a field where others' joy does not threaten you, but enriches you, where others' suffering does not distance you, but connects you, where your own experience is no longer judged, but understood. And in this shift, something profound is revealed. The problem was never that others were doing better. The problem was never that life was unfair. The problem was never even social media itself. The problem was the lens through which the mind was seeing. a lens shaped by comparison, by craving, by fear. And now, that lens is being replaced. Not by belief, but by direct experience. You are beginning to see differently, to feel differently, to live differently. And this is why the Brahma-viharas are not just teachings from an ancient tradition. They are deeply relevant to the modern world. Because the modern world has not created new suffering. It has simply intensified the old patterns. And what we need is not a new solution, but a deeper understanding of the mind. A way to meet life, not with reactivity, but with wisdom. Not with comparison, but with compassion. Not with instability, but with balance. And when this way of being becomes natural, no longer something you practice occasionally, but something you live, then something quiet, but powerful emerges. A sense of freedom. Not the freedom to control the world, but the freedom to no longer be controlled by it. You can enter the same spaces that once triggered you, and remain at ease. You can see the same images, and feel no lack. You can witness the success of others, and feel genuine joy. And in that freedom, the question that once dominated the mind, how do I measure up? Simply falls away. Because it is no longer relevant. You are no longer living in comparison. You are living in presence. And from that presence, something beautiful becomes possible. A life not driven by proving, but guided by understanding. A heart not contracted by fear, but open, steady, and at peace. And perhaps this is the deepest transformation of all. Not that the world has changed, but that you no longer need it to. Because the source of your well-being is no longer out there. It is here. In how you see,